Next time you're standing at a harbor, watching a massive cargo ship slowly drift into port, pay close attention. Look past the enormous steel hull, past the rusted anchor chains, past the crew waving from the deck. Look down, right at the waterline. There it is. That bold, unmistakable stripe of deep red paint cutting across the belly of the ship. Every ship, every port, every ocean on Earth. From the freezing waters of Norway to the tropical docks of Singapore, the red is always there. And for most people, it just blends into the scenery. Just another detail of the ship, like the foghorn or the anchor. But that red paint is not decoration. It is not a maritime tradition kept alive by nostalgic old sailors. That stripe of red is the last line of defense against one of the oldest and most relentless enemies in the history of human exploration. And the story of how it got there stretches back centuries, connects ancient wooden warships to modern chemical engineering, and hides a secret that the shipping industry quietly relies on to keep global trade from grinding to a halt. Welcome to Normal Things, Crazy Origins. Today we are uncovering the real reason every ship on Earth is painted red below the waterline. To understand the red paint, we first have to understand the problem. And the problem is alive. Literally. The moment any ship touches the ocean fights back. Seawater is not just salty water. It is a dense, living ecosystem teeming with microscopic organisms, algae spores, barnacle larvae, and one of the most destructive creatures in maritime history, the shipworm. Now, the shipworm is not actually a worm. It is a saltwater clam with a long, worm-shaped body and a set of tiny but incredibly powerful serrated shells at its tip, and it uses those shells like a drill. It bores directly into submerged wood, tunneling deep inside the hull, eating the cellulose as it goes. A single shipworm can grow to over 1 meter in length inside a wooden beam, and they never travel alone. Entire colonies of them would silently hollow out the hull of a ship from the inside while the crew sailed completely unaware. By the time the damage was visible on the surface, the structural integrity of the ship was already catastrophically compromised. Vessels simply sank in open water, not from storms or battles, but because their hulls had been eaten alive from below. But the shipworm was only part of the problem. Even if a hull survived the borers, it could not escape biofouling. This is the term for the dense, layered accumulation of marine life that clings to any submerged surface. Algae, barnacles, tube worms, bryozoans, mussels, they all attach within hours of a ship entering the water. Within weeks, the hull is covered in a thick, rough, biological carpet. And that carpet is catastrophic for performance. You might be thinking, why not just scrape it off? Why does a little sea life on the hull matter so much? Here is where the physics become brutal. A clean, smooth hull slips through the water like a blade. But a fouled hull, covered in rough, uneven biological growth, creates enormous drag. We are not talking about a minor slowdown. Studies have shown that severe biofouling can increase a ship's fuel consumption by up to 40%. For a massive cargo vessel burning hundreds of tons of heavy fuel oil per day, that is millions of dollars in wasted fuel per year. In the age of sail, it was even more catastrophic. A heavily fouled ship could lose up to half its speed and maneuverability. In a naval battle, that meant death. In a trade race across the Atlantic, it meant bankruptcy. The fastest, cleanest hull won. Everything else was a losing proposition. So sailors and shipbuilders spent centuries desperately searching for a solution. And the solutions they tried before the red paint are a fascinating museum of failed engineering. One of the earliest approaches was sheathing the hull in animal fat and tar. Sailors would careen the ship, tipping it on its side on a beach at low tide, and then slather the exposed bottom in a mixture of tallow, sulfur, and pitch. It helped slightly. It slowed the attachment of some organisms. But it washed off quickly, it smelled terrible, and it did nothing to stop the shipworm. Some navies experimented with a layer of sacrificial wood nailed over the hull, designed to be eaten while the structural timber underneath stayed protected. It worked after a fashion, but it added enormous weight and had to be replaced constantly. The Romans reportedly used lead sheathing on some of their warships. Lead resists biofouling reasonably well, but it is extraordinarily heavy and weakens the hull's flexibility. As ships grew larger and crossed longer distances, these makeshift solutions became increasingly inadequate. Then, in the late 1700s, the British Royal Navy made a discovery that changed maritime history. They began experimenting with thin sheets of copper nailed directly to the wooden hull below the waterline. The results were remarkable. Copper is a natural biocide. When copper interacts with seawater, it slowly releases copper ions into the thin layer of water immediately surrounding the hull. This creates a chemically toxic microenvironment. Barnacle larvae trying to attach simply die on contact. Algae spores cannot take hold. And the shipworm, drilling into copper-sheathed wood, quickly perishes. The HMS Alarm, one of the first Royal Navy ships to be fully copper-sheathed in 1761, returned from the Caribbean in extraordinary condition. Her hull was clean, her speed was undiminished. The copper sheathing was so effective that the Royal Navy rapidly rolled it out across the entire fleet. By the 1780s, copper bottoming a ship was standard practice, and it gave the British Navy a decisive strategic edge. Their ships were faster, required less maintenance, and could stay at sea longer than their rivals. There is a strong argument to be made that the copper-bottomed hull was as important to British naval dominance as the cannons on the gun deck. But then came the Industrial Revolution. Steam engines arrived, iron replaced wood, and the copper solution immediately created a catastrophic new problem. You cannot attach copper sheets to an iron hull. When copper and iron are both submerged in seawater, the salt water acts as an electrolyte, turning the two metals into a battery. This galvanic corrosion causes the iron to corrode at an accelerated and savage rate. Ships were literally dissolving themselves from the outside in. Engineers and chemists faced the challenge of replacing copper sheathing with something that could deliver the same biocidal effect without destroying the iron hull. The answer came in the form of anti-fouling paint. Chemists began developing paint formulations that incorporated copper compounds, primarily cuprous oxide, suspended in a binder that would slowly leach toxic copper ions into the surrounding water, mimicking the effect of the copper sheets. Cuprous oxide is not red because anyone chose red as a color. Cuprous oxide is naturally, inherently, a deep brick red. The color was a chemical inevitability. The red bottom was not a design choice. It was the color of the chemistry that kept the ship alive. Early anti-fouling paints were crude but effective. Over the following decades, marine chemists refined the formulations dramatically. They experimented with different binders that controlled how quickly the copper compounds leached out, creating paints that could protect a hull for a full voyage, or even an entire season at sea. By the 20th century, anti-fouling technology had evolved into a sophisticated engineering discipline. In the 1960s and 70s, tributyl, or TBT, was introduced as an incredibly powerful anti-fouling agent. It was almost perfectly effective. Ships coated with TBT-based paint had virtually no biofouling for years. But TBT turned out to be one of the most environmentally destructive substances ever introduced into the marine ecosystem. It did not just kill the organisms on the hull, it leached into the broader ocean and caused devastating reproductive damage to shellfish, fish, and marine mammals across entire coastal regions. By 2008, TBT-based anti-fouling paint was globally banned under the International Maritime Organization's AFS Convention. The industry was forced to return to copper-based chemistry and develop new, more environmentally sensitive formulations. Today's anti-fouling paints are sophisticated polymer systems. Some use self-polishing copolymer technology, where the outermost layer of paint very slowly dissolves as the ship moves through the water, constantly exposing a fresh, biocide-rich surface. Others use foul-release coatings, silicone-based surfaces so slippery that organisms simply cannot get a grip, even without chemical toxins. Modern chemistry can produce effective anti-fouling paint in literally any color. There is no technical reason the bottom of a ship must be red. Ships could have green bottoms, or blue, or matte black. And yet the red persists. Walk along any major harbor in the world, and you will still see it. The reason is a mixture of deep maritime tradition, practical psychology, and one very useful visual function. That stark contrast between a ship's dark upper hull and the red anti-fouling line creates a highly visible horizon reference. It allows port crews, surveyors, and the ship's officers to instantly read the vessel's draft, how deep it is sitting in the water. The deeper the red disappears below the surface, the heavier the load. The more red you can see above the waterline, the lighter the ship. This visual information connects directly to the Plimsoll Line, the series of official load markings painted on every commercial vessel's hull, indicating the maximum safe loading depth for different sea conditions. The red makes these critical safety markings immediately legible at a glance from a distance. So the next time you are standing at a harbor, watching that massive ship drift into port, and you catch that stripe of deep red just above the waterline, you will know the full story. It is not paint for tradition's sake. It is not a maritime fashion choice. It is the final evolution of a 300-year battle against invisible enemies, living creatures that once ate fleets alive from the inside out, and a chemical war fought with copper that accidentally colored every ocean-going vessel on the planet in the process. If you enjoyed this journey into the hidden history beneath the waves, hit that like button, share this video with someone who has stood at a harbor and never thought to ask why, and subscribe to Normal Things, Crazy Origins, for more stories about the everyday world hiding extraordinary secrets. Because the most surprising histories are always the ones hiding right in plain sight. Thanks for watching.